I will now share some music and let everybody in. Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Veterans Breakfast Club. I'm Todd DiPastino. I'm the executive director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit here in Pittsburgh, devoted to having these conversations where veterans share stories. And we often have special editions like the one we're having tonight of the Veterans Breakfast Club Scuttlebutt around special dates and anniversaries. And today is an important anniversary and quite a painful one for many of us. 3 years ago, on August 15th, 2021, the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, toppling the U.S.-supported government and taking over Kabul. Many of us, the capital city, and many of us will remember the scenes at the airport, at Kabul airport, as tens of thousands of people, Afghan allies, third-party people from other countries, American citizens, rushed to get out of the country before the Taliban could impose some retribution for their alliance with the United States. Tonight, we talk with somebody who was there, Fakhriya Hashemi. She is my neighbor here in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. Does she go by Ria? Do people call you Ria, Fakhriya?
I call her Ria just because I feel like it's a little bit easier to say. But
Okay. So, we'll call her Fakhriya. Fakhriya, with her, was an attorney in Kabul. Her husband worked in the Afghanistan Ministry of Women's Affairs. And they worked closely with the Americans. And so when Kabul fell, they had to get out. And get out they did, but it's a harrowing story on par with what we heard on Monday night about those who escaped from Saigon in 1975. So I asked Fakhriya if she would come and share her story with us briefly. She's on the road, coming back to Pittsburgh, I think, from a wedding. But with her is Jenny Barnicoat. Jenny, hello, how are you?
I'm great, Todd. Thanks for having both me and Fakhriya.
Well, I thank you for facilitating this. This is a wonderful guest to have. And I also want to let people know that I also asked Lieutenant General Jerry Martinez to join us. He is somebody who was involved, spent many, many years literally in Afghanistan over the course of his 38-year career. He was in many staff and command positions around the world, and he has a high-level view of the war. And I asked him if he would come and share his memories of that day and of the war in general. And I see we have Dave Seaver, served in Afghanistan, and I know we have others who are here who could share their insights and experiences. And of course, we always welcome people to make comments, ask questions. So let's dive into it. Fakhriya, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have some images, I think, to share. Jenny, some pictures.
Yeah. So before I share, I just wanted to explain my connection with Fakhriya. I attend a church in Mount Lebanon who several years ago got involved with a few different refugee resettlement agencies. And we were helping to resettle some of the new refugees coming to Pittsburgh. And I got a call one morning, hey, could somebody from St. Paul's go and take a new family down to Hello Neighbor, which is a wonderful resettlement agency, to pick up some food and supplies and toiletries. They've just arrived. So it was kind of last minute. I had a hard time getting someone. I said, let me do it. I picked up Fakhriya and her little tiny then 3-year-old and or two. I think she was 2, right, Fakhriya? And we got in the car and started driving through the Liberty tunnels. And I have never seen or heard a more traumatized little child because she was in the back seat and mommy was in the front seat. And I will never forget the terror that little girl was clearly experiencing. I could not pull over to the side of the road fast enough. So then Fakhriya got into the back seat with her little one, and the baby calmed down, and Fakhriya began to tell me what they had just been through the month before. And, you know, I cried, and we became fast friends from that point. So that's how I know Ria, and I'm going to stick with her forever because she's inspiring and wonderful. And I will share with you her story. Should I start
Yeah.
sharing some slides?
Thank you, Jenny. Yeah, please do if you can. If you could put the pictures up. And again, we know that the sound quality from Ria, she's on the road, she's in a car, she's with her
Sure.
family. It may drift in and out. So, Jenny, thank you very much for operating as a kind of a translator, go between.
Okay. Was I already sharing the screen? Was that already coming up, what I was showing?
No.
Okay, am I a host?
You should be co-host, I think. Yeah, you're co-host. So you should be able to go to that little green button at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, I was there. Okay, share screen. Oh, and it's not entire screen. Share. Maybe.
If you want to put.
Okay. Is that coming up at all?
Nope.
Okay. All right. This is bad. I'm so sorry.
We should have practiced this, Jenny.
I know. That's why I got on early.
It's a rookie mistake. We got to talking. That's what always happens. Somebody comes in early. We say that we're going to go over the technology, but we never do. We always just chat.
Okay.
So here's what we do. Here's plan B, Jenny.
Okay.
Could you send me that PDF? And you could email it to me, or you could put it in the chat here in the Zoom.
Okay.
And then I could have it and download it.
Okay. Copy. Forward it, and I'll put it in the chat. Over here.
In the meantime, I'll make an announcement, Todd.
Very good.
If anybody's interested, the LST that has come to Pittsburgh in the past, landing ship tank, is going to be down at the point, anchored over there by the Heinz Field. Well, whatever it's called now, Acrisure Field, from the 18th to the 22nd, I believe. I've toured it a couple of times in the past. I'll probably pass this time, but it's really kind of neat to be on an LST if you have the chance.
Oh, it's magical. We've done a couple trips there last time it's been in town. This is LST 325. It's based in Indiana, and it's one of the last, if not the last, kind of seaworthy LST World War II condition available. It sails around the country, down the Mississippi, down up the Ohio, and I think it's been some years since it's been in Pittsburgh. It's really worth seeing. Rick says it's there from August 30th to September 3rd. I think I remember seeing August 28th, Rick, that it might be one of the first dates that it's available to tour. It's absolutely worth seeing and worth touring. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, it is fascinating. And if you could tour it with somebody like Rick Arisman, who served on an LST, then that's even better. That's really special.
This one has a neat story. I think I remember it was somewhere in the Mediterranean originally when they found it, with the Greek Navy.
Yes.
Found it, and they refurbished it and sailed it across the ocean to the United States, and darn near perished a couple of times as they crossed the ocean into that thing.
And I believe that World War II veterans brought it back across the ocean. Rick,
28th to September 3rd, August 28th to September 3rd.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about an LST. And, we're tap dancing a little bit here because I'm waiting for Ginny to send but tell us about what an LST is.
Yeah, this is the 325's fourth visit. They were here in 2010, 2015, and I forget the first year, but it's long overdue. It's the last floating LST museum, at least in the U.S. and in the world, I believe. LSTs are tank landing ships. They were predominant during World War II. Many were built at Draveau here or Ambridge and sailed down the Ohio to the Mississippi to the Gulf and overseas. They have a crew of about 150. They have a large, what we call tank deck, which tanks, vehicles are strapped down for the transit, as well as a, not a well deck, but a lower deck enclosed for the same, for machinery. We carried a battalion landing team of Marines on one side of the ship, and the sailors lived on the other. Anyhow, if you have a chance, you should go down and see it.
And Rick, what did LST stand for? And I don't mean the
tank landing ship.
No, I'm talking about the funny one that
Large slow target.
Large slow target.
That's put kindly.
Yeah, we didn't want to use some of the other names that was called on air, but
they have a flat bottom. That's why they were able to beach as well as they did. But they sure rocked and rolled across the 7 seas.
Rick, somebody once told me that riding on an open ocean, especially the Atlantic Ocean, and an LST or its cousin, the LSM, was like being in a 55-gallon drum and have somebody banging on it regularly.
Yeah, especially in a 16-day transit.
Yeah.
From Norfolk to Rota, Spain.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rick. And Ginny, I want to let you know I did receive.
Okay. Are you able to open it?
I'm able to open it, and I believe this is the first picture.
Okay. So yeah, if you go back a few slides, we can start at the beginning of her story. Yeah. Okay. So this tells a little bit about, so she's shared her story with other groups. So Fakhriya, are you still with us?
I'll ask her to unmute.
Okay.
Fakhriya, if you can.
Okay. Are you still there? All right. So anyway, you saw Fakhriya. So as she's saying, she was born and raised in Afghanistan. Are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay. So it's saying on the screen that you were born and raised in Afghanistan, and just tell us a little bit about your upbringing, what kind of school you went to, what your family was like. You know, how life was in Afghanistan when you were growing up.
I was born in an educated family, and I completed my bachelor, and I got my master degree. While the situation was not as safe as it should be, but still, girls could go to school and universities. They could obtain their education or degrees. But after Taliban came, as you know, that they are not able to go to school.
So you did you receive a bachelor's degree and a master's? Can you tell us?
Yes, right. I have bachelor degree and a master in international. My master degree is in international relations.
So that's how you were led to help the American colleagues in Afghanistan. Can you tell us? Are you allowed to tell us at all what you did with the Americans?
Yes, I worked with Americans with a company. It was Justice Sector Support Program, which was funded by U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan.
Yeah. And then you came over to the United States on an SIV. I'm assuming everyone knows what that is, but can you just explain what that means?
Yes, people who work with Americans in Afghanistan, they were eligible for SIV, Special Immigrant Visa, that at first the period of working was 1 year, and later it was it was changed to 2 years. It took me, like, I applied for SIV on 2015, and I arrived here in the United States on 2019.
But your whole family couldn't come. It was just you and Nora and Weira, I think. And then at a certain point, you realized you needed to go back and help the others come back to the United States.
Right. At first, me and Weira we both were here in the United States, and Nura was born here. And in some points, my husband and other children were not allowed to come to the United States. It was because of missing documents, and I really missed my family, and I wanted to go back to Afghanistan and reunite with.
You wanted to get the rest of them over here. And if she unfreezes, I want. Can you talk about how you found out that Connor Lamb was helping some people, and you contacted him, and what happened? Oh man, she must be driving through the mountains, but with support. With the support of the Congressman Connor Lamb and some of the teachers at her children's school, she was able to actually get the paperwork for the whole family to get to the United States. But that was the harrowing part, right? Because then you had to go to that airport and wait. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Let's see. I'll ask her to unmute again.
Unmute.
Yes, actually, when I was in Kabul and the Taliban took over Afghanistan, it was the worst day for all the people. And as I sent you a map of Afghanistan, that the map showed that Afghanistan is on fire, and people they were trying to escape from Afghanistan. And me and my family was among those people escaping Afghanistan. And it was not easy because I spent 1 week in back door of the airport, and we didn't eat enough, and we didn't drink enough, and it was like frustrating for children. It was unsafe. It was like not healthy in the place the food we were eating, the place we were stayed. But still, we were trying to get into the airport, and I received emails from the office of Connor Lamb that like he was sending information for me that tonight this door, there were 7 doors for the airport, and he sent me the information that tonight this door will be open for 15 minutes. So in one night, I tried like 2-3 doors, but there were thousands of people. As I send the picture, I hope you can see it later, that there were thousands of people, and it was not easy for me to get into the airport with me. There were people we were 9 people, and especially children they were crying, and there were fire guns, shootings, and we were all scared, but still we were trying to leave Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll look at some of those pictures, but what she was saying, if you had trouble hearing, is they had to sleep in the back of their car for 7 nights with all of the whole family, and there was no food to eat and no water, and it was very hot, and during the day they would try and find little shady places to be in the cool at all, but it must have been quite a horrific experience. But then when you finally did get onto the plane, you flew to Germany. Is that right?
Right. We went to Qatar, from Qatar to another island. I don't know what island was it. Just I asked the um, air hostess that where we are. She said there's an island, and we went to Germany, and it took 12 hours to arrive to Germany, and the airplane, which was not like regular airplane, and 500 people were there with limited food and water. Yes, we went to Germany, and we spent 3 nights in Germany, and it was very cold in Germany. While we had summer clothes, but it was cold there.
You went from hot to cold, and then you flew to Texas, I believe, and you were processed and then eventually resettled in Pittsburgh. Is that right?
We arrived in
Washington, D.C.
Airport. Yes, Washington, D.C. There, I was very happy that my family is with me, but unfortunately they said, no, your family should go to a base because their documents needs to be processed. So again, I was disappointed and asking the authorities, how long does it take for them to be their documents to be processed? They said 3 weeks, but finally in 1 month, the documents were processed and other people could get help to travel, like plane tickets but I booked tickets for them and didn't want them to stay longer there. And finally, we were reunited, and I sent a picture. And even I enjoy seeing that picture because that's the best memory for me.
Yeah. And so now you come to Pittsburgh, and just real quickly run through some of the things that were so challenging at the beginning, because this is a place, I don't know how many people are on this Zoom, but we can all get involved with helping there are many new refugees coming to Pittsburgh right now and all over the country. And there are a lot of ways we can help right at the beginning, help get them their feet on the ground. So what were some of the challenges, Fakhriya?
The challenges, like when my family arrived here, as I mentioned before, that we were 9 people, and I was unemployed. I didn't have a job, and I needed to pay rent, and about the expenses. But after 6 months, my husband Mohammad, he got a job, and still I want to thank you that you helped my family with enrolling children at school, getting them to hospital, their appointments, PCP, and applying for other benefits and finding job for my husband. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Jenny.
No, it was a joy to be with you. So these are some of the things, and also learning to drive, right? You really needed to be able, in Pittsburgh, we don't have the greatest public transportation. So she wanted to learn to drive here and get her license.
Yes, that's the important one. That I always say that if you don't have a car in Pittsburgh, it's like you have it because it's very important for me. And you taught me to drive, and now on that time I was able to drive to my job, and I worked. Unfortunately, recently I lost my job, but still, I hope I can find a better one.
I hope so. And now, everyone, Fakhriya helps so many other people. So people are coming into Pittsburgh, and Fakhriya is sort of the kingpin now. She gets them sheets and pots and pans for their new apartments, and she helps to line them up with jobs. She teaches classes online for new refugees, and you're just really making it full circle and helping everyone else. And I don't know, Todd, if you're able to show any of those pictures.
There was only one picture in that slide deck.
Okay.
Yeah, only one picture, and that
Okay.
is
I'm gonna
an
see
image.
these ones.
An image that, or two pictures, images that I think many of us are familiar with, and I think they do help share the chaos and the drama of
Yeah,
that day 3 years
exactly.
ago on August 15th. Let me ask you, Jenny, if somebody wanted to help refugees continue to resettle here in the United States, I believe there are maybe 90 to 100,000 Afghanistan refugees, Afghan nationals here living in the U.S. that have been brought over since 2020 or 2021.
Right.
If somebody wanted to help, where would they turn? Where would they go? Is there an organization that you would recommend?
There are a couple of really good resettlement agencies that are doing a lot. One, as I mentioned, is Hello Neighbor.
Hello Neighbor.
And they're right in Pittsburgh, and they're feet on the ground helping people for a period of time. They set up mentors, tutors, after school tutors. They bring food and supplies. They've really been absolutely marvelous. And another one is JFCS, which is Jewish Family Community Services. They're based in Squirrel Hill. They also are very good at setting people up with employment and housing. So those are the two main ones that I would say right off the bat. Contact if you have time. They use volunteers to help people learn interview skills if that's something that you're good at. I sent you some pictures. I don't know if you got them yet. It's really been rewarding. I have to say it's been kind of life-changing for me to sort of walk in their shoes and sort of feel what they're feeling, and I wouldn't trade this experience for anything.
Jenny, I got one photo from you here by text. This is it.
Okay, I'm going to send you some more. It's because I'm trying to do two things at once, Todd, and I'm not doing it.
And you know what,
very well.
Jenny? It turns out the older you get, the harder it is to multitask.
Yeah, I'm not doing a very good job of multitasking.
I told Todd all about that.
Ridiculous.
Yes. Glenn gave me a lecture on how I'm.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I have to keep going back.
He
and
said,
getting
I'm slowing down. I'm not the person I used to be. It was
Oh,
sobering, but needed, much
yeah.
needed.
Well, I think you're doing a fabulous job. Just have to keep getting your phone number up because I keep losing it.
And that's okay. I mean, these photos, you know, they're images that I think we're familiar with.
No,
I think many of us do remember. I don't if
there's a few.
Fakhriya has a story around one image or something like that, that would be great. But
There's only a few.
okay.
And then you can move on and let other people talk. But I think it's important, and Fakhriya thinks it's important too, to share this story so that people understand and know what they've been through.
Jenny, I want to add to your information about the question that if people want to help,
Yeah.
whom they need to contact. Besides the resettlement agency, Afghans are like they have community that they recently they established, and they want to now they are in process to register the community with in government, that they can get the donations and distribute it for Afghan refugees, and also they want to have like mosque for them, and they have plans, and all they are doing by their like the participants pay for that, and the collect grants for implementing their plans, so they also can contact with the community.
So there's an Afghan community developing, is what she's saying, and looking to build a mosque down the road, but in the short term to donate items. And you can contact me about that. So Fakhriya, this was you all sleeping in the back of the car, is that right? Yeah.
And son sleep in the car, and we spent like 1 week, 7 days.
Yeah. 9 of you sleeping in that car. Is there another picture, Todd?
Yeah, quite
Yeah,
an
there was
artistic
paper.
one.
This one is very important to Fakhriya. I'll let her explain, but this is when she just felt that her country was on fire. The country that she loved and grew up in and cherished is literally on fire, right?
Right, because on that time, this picture made everyone cry. There was one song that it was very famous on that time. The song was about Afghanistan and that how the enemies attacked Afghanistan, and this map made every Afghan cry.
Mm-hmm. It was a social media picture. Okay, and what else you got there? What else did I send you, Todd?
I think that's it.
Okay, all right. Well, that gives you the idea.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
David Seaver had a question in the chat. Todd wanted to know if Fakhriya was on the first aircraft to come to Qatar.
Do you know, Fakhriya, if you were on the first airlift out to Qatar, or were there numerous ones before you got on?
No, it was not the first, because the evacuation started on August maybe 15 or 16, and I got into the airport on August 26.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Any
thank
other?
you. Yeah, I was going to say, are there other questions or comments people would like to make? Dave, I'll ask you to unmute. I see we have General Martinez here is with us. If people have other comments or questions, oh, there you are. Ben Wright. Here we go. Hello, Ben.
How you doing? Thank you. Well, Fakhriya, thank you so much for joining us. A couple questions. A lot of concern in the U.S. about U.S. citizens that may still be in Afghanistan, and also Afghanistan translators, particularly those who work with the U.S. military. And if you have any update about the possibility of them being able to come to the States.
What do you know, Fakhriya, about other translators or people that work with Americans like yourself being able to get over? Is it a slow process, but it's working, or what do you think?
Oh, need to ask her to unmute.
Sorry.
Actually, on that time, the people got into the airport and they were lucky, but people still are coming since 2021. It was at first it was a fast process, but after 22, the process got slower, and there are many people were killed before getting to the United States. Before getting out of Afghanistan, they were caught by Taliban and they were killed, unfortunately. But still, people are hiding from them, and they went to other countries. They can't work. They don't have enough money to stay without a job in other countries. Like, there are many people in Pakistan that they are not allowed to work. They don't have any income from any other resource. And if they go back to Afghanistan, they definitely would be killed. So there are people in need of like visa for the United States or any other country, but still they are not able to come. I hope the United States grant more visa for Afghans. Like, for example, my family is still, my two sisters are in Pakistan. And if they go back to Afghanistan, they would be killed because their family is in the United States, and they worked with Americans, so they are in danger. But still, they have to wait, and there is no way to get into the United States.
Thank you, Takriya. That's a grave concern situation.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, thank you, Fakhriya. Thank you very much, Ginny. I appreciate both of you coming on tonight and sharing your story. Please do feel free to hang on if you can. We may have some more comments, or you may want to comment on what you hear. I see that Lieutenant General Jerry Martinez has joined us. I'm going to ask him to unmute. Hello, General. Thank you so much for joining us. You and I had a fascinating conversation yesterday where I learned a little bit about your service. Jerry Martinez, 38 years in the United States Air Force, retired as a 3-star, served all over the world in command and staff positions and NATO. I think his last position was as commander of United States forces in Japan. Afghanistan is a place, Jerry, that commanded many years of your life, huh?
Yeah, Todd, thank you and for allowing me to be here today. It did. I have a lot of years of my life invested in Afghanistan. One, serving as the senior U.S. Military member in the United States Embassy in Kabul. Additionally, when I was in NATO, I was overseeing the operations of Afghanistan for NATO as a 2-star general. And a lot of people didn't realize or don't realize, you always heard about International Security Assistance Force, ISAF headquarters. That was the 4-star general commanding the operations in Afghanistan. That entire operation is NATO. That was a NATO organization. They answered to a German 4-star at the time when I was there in a place in the Netherlands called Brunsum, the Joint Fighting Headquarters in Brunsum. And so I was in that headquarters and oversaw Afghan ops for a couple of years there. And then on top of that, having flown in there as just a pilot, many, many times, supporting, getting supplies and things that you go there. So, yeah, I have a lot invested. It was a very tough day. And when I say days, watching the fall of Kabul. I'd been in that embassy. I lived in that embassy that I was watching being overrun. I was probably out at that airport 500 plus times. I would helo in and out of there almost every day, going to places or driving on the streets of Kabul to get to the airport to do things. So it was very difficult for me to watch. And it breaks my heart even today. I'm going to be very honest with all of you, just to watch a country that so many people work so hard to just give it a chance to then walk away and leave it in the hands of the Taliban.
Yeah, it's a day that's akin to, I think, April 30th, 1975 for our Vietnam veterans. I mean, it's something that you poured your heart and soul into. And what's interesting about your service is, I mean, the U.S. operations in Afghanistan lasted so long that your career kind of, you were able to see many different parts of the war from different perspectives as a pilot and then as a liaison, as you mentioned. Could you tell us about what by the time of 3 years ago, 2021, you were retired, and yet you were still involved in the helping some people get out? Oh, unmute me. That's really good. Okay. There you go.
We should use sign language.
There we go. I thought I bored you that fast that you muted me already in 45 seconds. Yeah, I did have the opportunity to experience that that country at multiple levels. And I think the thing that strikes me the most, one of the things we talked about yesterday, Todd, was just the fact that when I was a youngster, I saw that country from a different lens. I saw it as a pilot going in. I saw it as, I was in U.S. Transportation Command when the original, if we want to call it invasion after 9/11 occurred, and helped get all the things over there. And so I saw it from what I call the troop level. And then I grew up a little bit and I saw it from a more senior level. And then by the time I was a general and I was the senior officer in the U.S. Embassy, I saw that conflict in a whole different light. And what I saw from that level was the politics, the political level of what was going on in the country. And then, of course, overseeing it as a two-star for NATO, you grew even more. And when I say the politics involved, I don't necessarily mean those are negative. What I mean is that when you watch any type of conflict in the world, you think that these generals are out there leading wars. Well, one of the real big misnomers about these type of things is that men and women who wear military uniforms do not make defense policy. They implement policy. People who wear suits determine defense policy. And so every single aspect of the conflict, I got to watch how you have to go back to Washington, D.C. for approval. I'd never seen that before. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. We have civilian oversight of our armed forces for a very good reason, so that we don't become some type of military junta like Manuel Noriega or something like that. But what it does do is it shows that it's not as simple as always what is the right thing to do, what is the most efficient thing to do. And you could list all those different categories. It comes down to a tremendous amount of interagency cooperation from multiple agencies, on why we're going to do something and what is the impact to you. You can read about the Battle of Marja, which was a battle in Afghanistan that was pretty well advertised in advance. Everybody knew this battle was going to occur. By the time the battle occurred, we had talked about it and done so much interagency stuff that we roll into Marja and the Taliban, for the most part, weren't even there. But it's because we had to get President Karzai's permission to do certain things. We had a lot of different agencies. And so I think that was probably the most telling thing for me as I grew at the different levels involved in Afghanistan, is much in the end, interagency cooperation and political, requirements and direction came into the war.
So the political requirements of a war often clash with the military expediencies or military requirements. What might be best for the military is not necessarily best for the political situation. The great Prussian military theorist and General Karl von Clausewitz famously said, "War is politics by other means." All wars are political. But as you rose in the ranks, you were able to see the political side. And man, Afghanistan, and I will preface this to say, I'm getting into troubled waters here. We're a nonpartisan, non-political organization. That being said, we talk about, global situations that are inevitably political. That the war in Afghanistan is as political as they come, because if you want to kind of scroll back with us, give us a little bit of a history lesson. We initially went into Afghanistan October 2001 to get Osama bin Laden and other al-Qaeda elements that were responsible for the attacks of 9/11. The Taliban government, which had been in place for 5 years, had been protecting or providing a safe haven to al-Qaeda. That mission was accomplished fairly quickly, right? And toppling the Taliban government fairly quickly within a year or two. But then the Taliban fought back and it became this low-level insurgency war that was more complicated. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a very good description. We learned some lessons in Vietnam that insurgency, counterinsurgency warfare, guerrilla warfare, that is not a fun war to fight. It's very, very difficult. And, when we rolled the original forces into Afghanistan at the start of the conflict, they came from the north, lots of pictures of special forces guys on horses, and the Northern Alliance, some of those previous Afghan warlords who are now working with us. We rolled in there pretty quickly, frankly, and before you knew it, we were in charge of Bagram, Kabul, and the country seemed to be in okay hands. But how fast that deteriorated because, you know, what the Taliban did, and there were other elements in there as well. You know, there was Al Qaeda, there's some other groups that you know, we always blame the Taliban, but there are clearly other groups in there too that you know, were not friends of the United States or any of the forces going in there. But you know, now you started seeing those people come out of the woodwork in their own time and in their own fashion. And you know, we would go into villages, and it was very, very difficult because you know, you had people in villages just trying to survive. You know, they're just good Afghan people. And, you know, survival means one day you better cooperate with the Taliban, and then the next day you better, you know, cooperate with these forces, because I don't think there was loyalty one way or the other. It was a matter of survival for these families.
Right.
And that war, you know, migrated very, very quickly from the way it started. It migrated into really just all out counterinsurgency. And, you know, others would call it guerrilla warfare. And I even had to go testify to Congress on this, you know, that channel nobody watches, C-SPAN. I was on that channel there, you know, sitting there testifying to Congress about guerrilla warfare. And, you know, it's good, it's bad, and those kind of things based on my experiences in Afghanistan.
I'm going to share a map of Afghanistan so people could understand the situation on the ground here. October 2001. The green is where the Northern Alliance, the United States allies, were located. There were also pockets of Northern Alliance, tribal groups, I guess you would call them, in the center of the country, but surrounded by this pink here, or salmon color, which was Taliban. Afghanistan, very rural country, very sparsely populated, landlocked country, very difficult country to fight in, to supply as an outsider.
Todd, Brad Washabaugh has a great question that he put in the chat. I'll ask him to unmute. Is that okay?
Oh, yes. Perfect.
Okay. Brad?
Hey, General, thank you for being with us tonight, and
Thank you.
appreciate your expertise and insight. I know this question's been asked over and over again, but did we not try to learn from the Russian experience and the insertion of such great force into a country that really had all these challenges that Todd talked about, and the dangers of extended presence in a country like Afghanistan? Were they largely ignored, or do we have a hubris that we thought we could just do it better?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad. I'll tell you what I experienced is, you know, I think after 9/11, we had a very emotional country at large, right? And we had a right to be. You know, 2 large towers came down, you know, tons of people killed. We had airplanes crashing in fields in Pennsylvania. We had the Pentagon hit by an airplane. And I think our country at large was emotionally invested that we need somebody to be held responsible for this. We need some type of closure. And everybody knew that Afghanistan was where that whole attack was planned, you know, with Osama bin Laden and under the protection of the Taliban. And so, you know, I think we went into this war thinking that we're going to go in there and we're going to quickly defeat the Taliban, and then the Afghan people at large are going to take control of their country. But, you know, you all have heard of mission creep. You all have heard of, you know, a quagmire, a just sucking chest wound that you go get into, and then all of a sudden it's very difficult to leave. And what I saw while I was there, and remember being in the U.S. Embassy, I wasn't just with military. I was with the FBI. I was with, you know, Drug Enforcement Agency. I was with all those agencies that are typically in an embassy. And everybody was trying to take a country that is somewhat in the Stone Ages, not because of the people, but because of the Taliban rule they were under. They put them in that place. And I think everybody in my mind felt like they could make a difference. So we were trying to put in rule of law, whole group of people doing that. We had DEA people going after the drugs and doing things to show the Afghans there's a better way of life than growing heroin and poppy and all these other things. You know, and it just goes on and on and on, all the different agencies. And I just think we got so invested in it so deep that it was very difficult to pull out. And, you know, we talked about the political part of this, Brad. I think if you're, you know, the politician in Washington, D.C., you know, are you the one that pulls the plug, and what are the ramifications of that? And so we got into this idea that what we're going to do is we're going to make the Afghans self-sustainable. We're going to teach them all these things. We're going to give them the equipment. We're going to train them. We had an entire training group that was led by an Army 3-star general that just implemented all these different things. And it went on and on and on. And I think, frankly, we lost sight of what the Russians dealt with. And we tried to think that maybe we could make it better.
Yeah.
And it proved to be very difficult. And if you want to hear something very ironic, Brad, as when I became in NATO, I flew to Moscow with the Deputy Strategic Allied Commander of Europe. He and I went with another group of people. We flew to Moscow to ask the Russians about the lessons they learned about departing Afghanistan
Oh my.
and what we
Oh,
should
wow.
be doing if we're going to be on the way out. And I sat at a table with a lot of Russian generals. And then on my side, of course, we had a British Deputy Strategic Allied Commander of Europe, and me and a few other general officers. And we knew that the NATO mission was going to wind down. You know, this is now the 2013 to 2015 timeframe. We knew it was winding down politically in a bunch of other ways. And so we actually went to the Russians to ask, what did you learn when you ran out of there basically with your tail between your legs, getting shot at all the way as they headed north to get out of the country?
Well, that's some information I've never heard, General. Thank you. I guess, you know, this is like the U.S.'s Achilles heel here. It seems like we're prone to have these mistakes in our willingness to try to do good. I'm a retired Marine colonel. I went to school with Frank McKenzie. He was a major. I was lieutenant colonel, bright guy. But the public thinks that when things start going bad, a general should resign to give the politicians the message that things aren't right and therefore I'm going to resign. Now, Frank thinks differently, that it's not for a general to resign because our job is to stay apolitical and just do what the politicians say. But how do we get sense to the policymakers that things aren't going right before they go too far down the road like we did in Afghanistan? Is it the State Department? It's not the individual voters that can make a difference. I mean, how do we prevent this from happening again? Because in the US, we have this feeling that we should do good all around the nation. And we have people in these interagencies who follow their flag of trying to do the best they can. And before you know it, we have mission creep and we're in a situation that's very perilous and tragic.
Yeah, that's a very fair assessment. And, you know, this thing was, you know, when you hit this point where you've put so many billions of dollars into something, it's very hard, you know, to just walk away from it. And even now, and I'm not in agreement with the way we left the country, but even now, just you saw in the news yesterday or day before, you know, we walked away in a manner. And what are the Taliban doing? They're holding military parades with all the vehicles and things that we left behind and the weapons and things like this. And so I think that plays a part into it, as our senior leaders, as they're trying to go, at what time do I pull out of there? And then what do those ramifications look like? And every year that we put more and more billions of dollars in there, it even becomes more difficult to get out. And, you know, I can tell you that I saw people that never slept. You know, they were up working at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, you know, just nonstop working to make Afghanistan better. The people that were there believed in it, and they needed to. You know, they believed in it. They felt we could make a difference. They worked very, very hard to give the Afghans every opportunity to try to make it and be independent and survive. But in the end, Brad, this comes down to the political leaders make these decisions.
Yes.
And, you know, I've heard that too, where they say, well, the general should resign in protest. But if you're the general and you resign, I'm going to just be honest with you, nothing's going to change. It's not like the president's going to go, oh, that poor general resigned. You know, what you can do is you just got to be a strong voice and without crossing a certain line. And that may sound a little cowardice to you in what I'm describing, but it's really not. You know, what we as generals were grilled into our heads from being young officers, and you certainly as a colonel understand it, is that unless the order is illegal, immoral, or unethical, you know, if it's not one of those, then you're not the boss. You follow your boss's orders. You know,
Right.
if they're unethical, if they go, hey, go in there and kill these civilians so we can do this. No, I refuse that order and I will resign and I will not do it. And you see generals that do that. But these orders were not like that. They were, hey, let's train the Afghans on how to manage their banking system. Let's train the Afghans on how we teach them to fly helicopters and airplanes. Let's build a security force. Let's build a special forces. And, you know, the problem is all along the way, you know, we just kept stumbling. We taught the Afghan, you know, to have a banking system. We caught the vice president of Afghanistan going through the Kabul airport with $52 million in cash in suitcases, going to Dubai. An investigation was done, and the investigation, not by us, by the way, concluded that he said he didn't do it. And so it was kind of just dropped. You guys can go on the internet and you will see that one day in the Kabul bank, $950 million went missing and has never been found to this day. 950 million gone. And so, you know, people were trying and we were telling these things, you know, up the chain of command that, you know, this isn't working or this is working, but it's not that general's decision, and it wasn't General McKenzie's decision. People think it is because he's the CENTCOM commander. He gets told what to do, you know, and that's just the reality of it.
It seems like we were trying to build a jigsaw puzzle and nobody took a step back to see that pieces were missing and it would never go together, that everybody was holding a piece and just wanted to put that in that country from whatever agency, but nobody could stand back and say, look, we don't have the pieces to complete this puzzle. Let's go on a different approach. You know, I wonder just how much the chairman of Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of State actually can talk and have an honest conversation about who can control all these pieces to prevent us from going down this road again, you know, because we all mean well, but somebody's got to take a leadership role and say, we mean well, but we have to do different. And I'm going to make a decision, you know.
Yeah, there's no question on that, Brad. And I think, you know, we like to say history repeats itself and we learn from our lessons, but we didn't learn from Vietnam, evidently, because, you know, Vietnam was a different situation to a degree, but still this thing just creeped and creeped and creeped and grew into eventually a departure like Vietnam. Yeah. So clearly not good. You know, my hope is that this was a 20-year, excuse me, you know, thing that went on that I hope understand we can't do this again.
If I could interject just for a moment, Todd, there's some other interesting comments in the chat. Maybe we want
Oh, yes. No, I was going to go to Daria. I'm sorry, you're going to ask a question first?
Well, no, I was going to paraphrase a very famous historian, not Todd. I'm going to paraphrase him, Will Durant, who Todd would recognize. All right, basically has said, hey, this is the kind of thing that has gone on since the dawn of time for all world powers. The Roman Empire did it. The British Empire did the same thing, et cetera, et cetera. This is a lesson that, you know, is taught to world powers over and over again. And it's just hard to affect those lessons because they all happened so long ago. Although the British Empire, they were kicked, you know, they had their Afghan problems as well.
Yeah.
But with that, you want to go to Daria?
Yeah, Daria put an interesting comment here in the chat that Jerry alluded to. Daria?
Hi, no, thank you, Todd. And thank you, General Martinez. This is for you. So I just want to put my question in context, even though it seems like you might have already answered it. But my father served in Southeast Asia and then a number of tours in Vietnam, not in the military, but in USAID. Yeah. So, but he worked closely with the military, and I grew up over there, and it was all about building democracy. And what was interesting for me was when things started happening in Afghanistan and then in Iraq, they asked him to go there as part of the effort, and he was like, no. But as I watched, you know, he and I often discussed it. He's no longer with us, but one of the things he was always saying is, don't they remember Vietnam? Because these countries, like, you can't just say, hey, be free, now have a democracy. And I was just, so I'm wondering, like, to the extent to which Vietnam hovered in the background, because for me, it was always hovering in my ear. And then the other thing is that he had a great feeling for the soldiers, for the military, who he saw as being tasked in like Afghanistan as well as Iraq with, like, oh, do you need schools built? Oh, do you need electricity done? When normally that was part of what local infrastructure was part of what USAID was tasked to do, but when you gave it to 23 and 24-year-old soldiers, as well intentioned as they may be, it's just not the same.
That's very true. And Daria, thank you for your service. I as a person being, you being associated with USAID, I was right next to them a lot in Afghanistan. And, I saw the unbelievable efforts that group went through to try to make Afghanistan better for the people. And I flew out with the U.S. ambassador many times to like schools for women, in these real remote villages that these are not military places. I went to orphanages to see young Afghan children, that we were trying to give them a better life, and I watched all these, and USAID had their hands in all of this in a good way. So it was really a great organization. But, I think this is one of those dichotomies or those lines of whose job is what. I heard people in the Battle of Marja go, we went in there, we secured that village, we ran the Taliban out of there, and then there was nothing behind it. They were mad at the State Department. There was no infrastructure that came in. There was no, schools. There was no this. And so what happens is the U.S. forces leave because there's nothing there to protect. They're doing another thing. And then Marja gets taken again. And I think this separation of defense and state to a degree, most of the military leaders that I know work really, really hard to mend that fence today, really. Secretary Mattis, when he was the Secretary of Defense, I was on some private video teleconferences with him as we were managing the Korea issue and North Korea shooting missiles over Japan and in the Sea of Japan and things. And, he was adamant that DOD will work with the State Department. We will partner with the State Department. We will do these. And I think every commander's intention is to have a great connection. And that is the sole reason I was in the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. Is you had a senior officer to manage, and I lived in the embassy and traveled everywhere with Ambassador Eikenberry, but I worked for General McChrystal, the 4-star commander. And that was the sole reason what you describe is trying to make sure that the groups are talking together. And so I had a whole team under me that managed drugs, they managed border issues, they managed education, and these are military people. And they were the liaisons to the civilian agencies within the embassy that were doing that at large in Afghanistan. So I think the effort is there. But, I can also tell you that state and defense are two just very different organizations. Very different. Their rules are different. Their missions are different. Their mannerisms and how they attack problems are different. And their budgets are different. Right. And so with the best of everybody trying to do this and meld these things together, it is I think 10,000 years from now, that slight amount of friction in there will probably always be there in those two trying to make things perfect.
Right. And I didn't mean to imply that it was like a failure. It's almost an impossibility.
Yeah. Don't take that as a failure at all. I didn't take that way. It's a real friction that exists in any interagency operation. And the two groups are just very, very different. It doesn't mean we don't have the same goal. I promise you, Ambassador Eikenberry was up every night at god-awful hours trying to do things to make Afghanistan better. He really believed in it and gave his heart and soul in doing so. And so, frankly, did all of the State Department people that I worked with very closely. But the realities is state and defense are different, and we're budgeted different, and we think different. And even though we may have the same goals, working side by side and making it work perfectly is not always easy.
Boy, is this a big conversation. Thank you very much, General. And I just want to remind people this is the Veterans Breakfast Club, VBC Scuttlebutt. We have it every Monday night at 7 p.m. and then also on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. And I'm happy to say that we'll be able to continue this conversation next Monday, August 19th. We'll be back talking again about the fall of Kabul because there is so much to talk about. I do want to get deeper into the challenges of nation building. Don and Greg and Justin and Chris Perolo, I know, have comments and questions I want to address. But so we'll be back next Monday night, and we're going to continue this conversation this evening. I'm just taking a station break here. We will be back Monday night, August 19th, continuing this discussion of the fall of Kabul with Michael Cook, who's a U.S. Army veteran who was instrumental in helping 20 Afghans get out of Afghanistan in 2021. We'll have the conversation with him and continue what we're talking about today. Talk about mission creep. We're also doing this special program, Greg Yost and I are, on how the Electoral College works. You know, the Veterans Breakfast Club, we're all about the veterans and military community. I'm a historian. Greg Yost is a historian. Glenn Flickinger is a historian. Greg is especially an expert on the Electoral College. I've done some lecturing on the Electoral College, and it's so beguiling, it's so bewildering. This is a one-of-a-kind institution, nothing like it the rest of the world. And we have this big election coming up. You know, we're non-partisan, non-political, but we thought it would be good to do a program, a kind of a conversation about the Electoral College, a little bit of the history, a little bit of an explanation of how it works. Our justification for including this in Veterans Breakfast Club programming is the Electoral College that chooses our commander-in-chief. So we're doing a special program a week from tonight, August 22nd at 7 p.m. Then 2 weeks from tonight, we're doing World War II Jeopardy with Glenn Flickinger and again Greg Yost and Ray Brendel and several others. We'll be sending out reminders about this program. We have a magazine that comes out quarterly. This is our summer magazine. It's devoted to Masters of the Air war over Europe. We send it out to almost 10,000 households, and we would be happy to send this to you if you would like to receive a copy. If you didn't receive one in the mail in July, it's because we don't have your address. Let us know your address, and we'll make sure you get it in the mail. You could email me at todd, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. I want to thank our sponsors for this evening's program, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They are committed to educating people about the hazards of tobacco use, advocating for healthier places to live, work, and play, and also assisting people who want to quit tobacco. You can find out more about what they do at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. And then, of course, we have UPMC for Life. They are a stalwart sponsor of so much of what we do. They offer Medicare Advantage plans written by veterans for veterans. And you can find out more about the plans that they have on offer at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. Okay. Oh, and I will put the our survey here in the chat. We always like to hear about how we've done, what we could do better, and suggestions you have maybe for future topics and programs. It takes 2.5 minutes to fill out the survey. I'll put the link here in the chat. I want to go to, is Justin still with us? Justin from Dallas. Justin is, but Dave Seaver, I also want to go to Dave. Dave, you were there. Would tell me your experiences.
Boy, was I there. Yeah. You know, I volunteered to do this deployment. You know, I went to Qatar in June of 2021, thinking that I would go and be in the air medical staging facility and doing the mission that I trained and did my entire career. And the Air Force had other ideas. I wound up in the med group as the medical operations flight commander, which meant all patient care fell under my purview. So, you know, I was told there was a plan. So the plan was starting July 28th, we could anticipate one aircraft every 6 to 8 hours with up to 200 people on board to a maximum of 5,000 people. I sent, did you get the pictures I emailed?
I got one picture.
What did you get? The tent? Which one did you get?
There, I'll show you the one I have.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
So yeah, so we were prepared for that. You know, it was, you know, you have a can-do attitude. Yes, sir, we can do that. No problemo. You know, the plan was they would get off the aircraft. They would go by us. If they needed medical care, great. If not, they would go into the building next to us. They would be, oh, that's Raul. That's our CCAT doc. That's a whole nother, that's actually a casualty from the bombing on the 26th. You can't even see the patient for all the equipment there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. We'll talk about that maybe Monday
Okay.
night if you want
Okay.
to. So, that was the plan. They would come by us. They needed medical care. They would go on into the building next to us, be in processed, immigrated into the country of Qatar, be put on buses and taken to Camp Asalea, which is an army facility in closer to Doha from where Al Udeid Air Base is. Well, July 28th came and went and nothing, nada. Don't know what happened. I was hoping maybe General Martinez could give me some insight on that because I still have no idea 3 years later. Sunday morning, August 15th, Sunday was my day off. And about 9 o'clock in the morning, Qatar time, my phone rings. It was my squadron commander. He didn't even say hello. All he said was, "We have aircraft on the way. Get in here." So yeah, that's one of our Pittsburgh birds that was there that was part of the airlift. So you showed in the earlier, you saw the picture of the C-17 jam-packed full of people, 823 souls on board. That was the first aircraft that we got. We were expecting 200, we got 823. After that, it was just a steady stream of C-17s. 4-hour flight from Kabul back to Al Udeid. C-17, it was so crowded on the ground, the C-17s would have to circle sometimes for hours, sometimes so long we'd have to send a tanker to keep them up there until we could clear room on the ground to land them.
Oh.
So to make a long story short, between August 15th and August 31st, when the airlift ended, 5,000 became 58,000 refugees. We weren't expecting to keep refugees on the base. So those first few days, we had nothing. We didn't have water. We didn't have food. We had water, but it was all in pallets stacked out, just out in the open air, and the sun's pounding, it's 125, 130 degrees every day. So we had hot water. But, it was literally, I call it a humanitarian crisis of our own making. I remember going into the DFAC, the dining facility, to get food, and everybody was stuffing fruit and Pop-Tarts and whatever they could in their pockets to take just to give these people something to eat. Because, they're coming from HKIA, Hamid Karzai International Airport there in Kabul. Some of them haven't had food and water for days. And now we're taking them out of 90, 95 degree Kabul and putting them into 125, 130 degree Qatar. And it was a mess. I will say that was the toughest 3 weeks of my life. 4 hours of sleep a night was a good night for me. I was so busy.
Dave, that clearly that memory is going to be with you forever, for the rest of your life. I mean, when you have talked to me about it, it's a important part of your service experience.
Sure.
What about it? Was it just because it was exhausting, or because you had these thousands of people who were kind of scared and vulnerable?
Yeah. You have people who are in extremis, and we're taking them, from their home. So obviously they're safe, but now, they're scared. They don't know what's going to happen next. They're desperate, and, we're just putting them anywhere we can. That's why I tried to email those pictures to you here a little while ago, because, I had the tent set up ready for the initial plan. And as the saying goes, the war plan goes out the window when the first shot's fired, because that tent facility didn't last a day. And all of a sudden we are stuffing people into hangars and warehouses and anywhere we can put them. For the first few days, it's whatever we can do just to take care of them until contracting could get, porta potties in, more water, food, etc.
here's a map from the BBC. I think that was taken after or created after. I think it was in 2022, but it shows much the same situation that occurred in Vietnam in 1975. The takeover was much quicker, much faster than the US anticipated. This map on the left is the situation on the ground in Afghanistan on July 9th. The red are the areas controlled by the Taliban. The blue are the areas controlled by the US supported government. And the yellow or the gold are those contested areas. You can see how quickly, in a little bit more than a month, 5 weeks later, the entire country, save this little area, was controlled by the Taliban. The fall of Kabul, the fall of Afghanistan, was much more rapid than anticipated, much more complete. And I know, General, you have some insight into that process. What was the estimate for how long it would take for the Taliban to take control?
So if you go back and watch the news, you're going to see a lot of senior military officers who either were now retired and had been like the overseer of Afghanistan in a senior position, some of them 4-stars in Afghanistan. And you're going to see it's almost like they were given talking points, because almost to the person, what most of the generals say is nobody could have seen that coming.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, because I'm a pretty honest guy here, that I think the phrase I use is a chimpanzee that escaped from a zoo could have seen that coming. If you served in Afghanistan and were involved at a pretty senior level, you could clearly tell that that country was never going to be able to just be left alone. We're getting out, goodbye, all the Americans are gone. It just was not going to get there. Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't able to hold its own. There was a small presence there, and that presence, in my mind, was the glue that was, keeping things together and keeping the Taliban away, and it was working. And one of the things I don't know if everyone on this call realizes is that I mentioned earlier the International Security Assistance Force. This NATO security force was in charge of doing all these things in Afghanistan, to include fighting. In January of 2015, that changed. ISAF headquarters, the flag was taken down, and a new headquarters was named, and it was called the Resolute Support Mission, RSM. And the Resolute Support Mission was train, advise, assist. That's the new mission. It was no longer to be out there fighting and taking on all these different elements like the Haqqani network and the Taliban and all these others. It was to train, advise, assist. And I was in NATO when that occurred, and again, overseeing Afghanistan. So we were a part of trying to help write the rules for what all the nations would agree on. And when the RSM mission took over, if you go back and look, you'll see that there were not deaths from combat like there had been before that, because the troops were not, NATO forces were not supposed to be in combat anymore. We were training, advising, and assisting. And so all of those people that were involved there, we were embedded in different elements of the government, both at the provincial level in these provinces, both at the national level, and of course at like unit levels within towns and cities. And you could just see that the Afghans were not ready to be left alone. They just weren't. And it's not, again, I don't say that disparagingly to the Afghans. They worked hard. They had infrastructure in place, but you can't take a society that the Taliban ran into the 1500s and then expect it to operate like a modern day force. It just is not going to happen overnight. And so a small presence of people keeping the government intact and things like that, I think was the right answer. And when we made the decision, we're pulling everybody, and especially when things started getting bad and we evacuated the U.S. Embassy, it was over. There's no more glue to hold this in place. And then you saw Ashraf Ghani, the president, he got out of there. Other people started getting out of there. Governor Atta, a very famous warlord of Mazar-e Sharif, the governor in that area, he was fighting. His people were fighting to the end. And then at some point he had to get out of there. And I can't remember where he went. I think it was like Uzbekistan or somewhere. But once it started falling, there's no way it was going to stop.
Boy, oh boy. Justin Miller.
Yeah, General, my comment is I'm a Vietnam guy. I did my first tour of the 25th Division. Then I came back and I trained Vietnamese helicopter pilots. And then I went to evaluate the training. What I came away with talking to them and a few other people, I don't know if you ever met General Tate, Frank Tate. He was with NATO over in Session, Poland. But over the course of 72 through 5, talking to these young people, it wasn't there for them to go forward per se. Get the job done was not within their purview. It was, like you said, survival. And so there were several of us that said in 72 and 3, this is not going very far. We're going to be leaving badly.
Yeah.
And it is a shame that we don't learn those things. It's hearts and minds of the people. We did so many bad things that the hearts and minds didn't like us anyway.
Right.
I will say though, if you ever go to Hanoi, there is a Willis Jeep up there in their museum that only has 112 miles on it. And it's a 25th Division Jeep along with a 175 artillery piece at the same museum. So I don't know what's going to be left in Kabul. It's a shame we gave up the airport though. I mean, should we have stayed from the airport instead of the airport?
Yeah, and in my opinion, by the time the airport was under the siege it was at the very end, I don't know how we could have ever sustained holding it. I mean, we could have held ground, but then what do you do with it?
Could we have held the air base?
Yeah, you have two air bases that came into real contention. One was Kaya, the Hamid Karzai International, and the other was Bagram Air Base.
Right.
15-minute helicopter ride up the road. Many critics have said we should have never let Bagram go. That was where we held our biggest prison. That's where many, many bad people were detained. And it was a monstrous base. That thing was gigantic. It was huge. There were camps within the camp of Bagram. There was Camp Alpha. There was Camp, it was so big.
So we were looking at Fort Hood in the middle of Afghanistan.
It really was. It was enormous. And I loved going up there. It was an incredible operation that was going on. And I went to Bagram quite a bit. I think the way, Justin, that this thing played out is, you hit a point in any conflict where you've got to cut your losses. Okay. You've got to figure out, what am I doing here? And what are we doing here? And that airport in Kabul was surrounded and fell so fast that I don't know, by retaining it and holding it, and having troops on there, what we would have accomplished at some point, because your U.S. embassy was now empty. It's gone. So there is no U.S. flag. There's no U.S. presence. What is your mission when you hold that airfield? And, we had some incredibly brave people trying to hold it in the onslaught, and they were killed, by a bomb. Sadly, it's horrific that those young people had to die for that, in that situation. And I think if we had, having Bagram already fallen and gone, and I wouldn't even say fallen, we left it. We opened the gates and we split. If that field's gone and your U.S. embassy is empty and there really is no more presence, I don't know the advantage of holding the airfield. In my opinion, it was best to just get out of there.
I mean, that's not exactly, I'm saying, if we were going to have to pick one place to make the last stand, I would have thought Bagram would have been the last stand instead of being the airport in town. But
yeah, I think that's true. That is, in my mind, Justin, true, because Kaya is just in the middle of the city. You can walk right up to the walls of it, and it's
right.
Easy to. Bagram's out kind of in the boonies. That it's got some big mountains around it, and kind of lives in a bowl, but it's not like city right up against the fences at all, in fact. But the problem is if you keep Bagram, okay, and you don't have any control in Kabul, then how do you help the government, which is all in Kabul? How do you?
They were gone.
Yeah, it's very complex. It's very complex. If I could go back and do things my way, and again, this is really Monday morning quarterbacking. It's kind of unfair, but I think we should have kept both fields. And then what we do is just keep a small force to keep things intact. the Afghans were absolutely capable of providing security. Many of them were very, very well trained, but they just needed like their big brother nearby to help guide them a little bit and to do things and to keep things intact. And when the provinces started falling, with that map you guys just showed, that brother, near me all of a sudden wasn't there. And so
Right.
what do you do? What do you do if you're an Afghan? The forces that are there helping you and making you better are gone. The only people you have left is the Taliban, and most of those people were not going to fight the Taliban, knowing they had no ally behind them.
Well,
I'm sorry, Neil Ash, you have your hand up. We're talking about kind of the wisdom and the challenge of nation building. Chris Perolo, you wisely said here, it rarely ever works, and I think that's true. It did work in Germany. It worked in Japan. It worked in, you could say the Philippines, maybe. But those are all places where we had a troop presence for decades, years and years. And there wasn't an insurgency taking place in those places. Neil.
Yeah. Hi, it's his son, Adam.
Oh, hey, Adam.
Hey, how's it going? My larger question is, what should U.S. foreign policy be in the future, given our experience in Afghanistan? Is it possible to have a U.S. presence without causing locals to feel as though it's just simply a U.S. scheme going on and that they don't really stand for local values? Ultimately, is it possible to actually avoid forever wars in a modern context where guerrilla warfare seems to be the norm?
Great question, Adam. Thank you very much for asking it. Jerry, got to throw it to you.
Yeah, sure.
You got
what I can
3
tell you.
minutes, Jerry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
3
you
minutes?
have 3 minutes. I think you could handle that.
I got it. I'm used to this. Is it possible to avoid war forever? No. We've been at war for thousands and thousands of years, and war will always be a constant in if there's mankind, and for a whole bunch of reasons, whether it's religious, political, you can go on and on and on. Picking foreign policy it sounds real easy to do, but you have to understand that every single one of these conflicts, they all started and ended in their own way. They're not cookie cutter. They're difficult. And so, to say that our foreign policy will always be, we won't do this, or like we'll be isolationists, which we were at one time prior to World War II, or we will be this or we'll be that. The problem is you can have a great policy, but the world is the world and it changes around you every single day. And so it's not as simple as let's just make a policy and we're going to stick with it. Got 2 minutes to spare.
Yeah, man, that's so true. Yes. Yeah, you could have the policy, but the world challenges it and pushes against it and cracks it to the point where you have no choice but to depart from it. It seems like every war that the U.S. gets into, it's kind of dragged in by in some dramatic fashion. The attacks of 9/11 being one of them. Boy, do we have interesting comments, interesting food for thought. Greg Yost says, hi, Adam. He just graduated from high school. Please tell him what his world will look like 50 years from now. A lot of discussion again about the nation building concept. Chris Perolo, why don't we give you the last word? Because you are so eloquent. And we haven't heard from the Navy yet. And how are you, Chris?
Well, simply, we are a country that wants to give freedom, and therefore we believe we need to go into a country and actually impart our values and that freedom to that country. In the example you gave of Japan and the European countries, they were already solid nations with values similar to ours, or at least values. We just restored them. But when you go into a place like Afghanistan or anywhere we've gone lately, Vietnam and that, and we say, okay, you guys are of an entirely different culture and mindset, but we're going to teach you our mindset, and you're going to love it because it's going to be better. That's an uphill slog, and it takes generations. And the United States does not have generational patience.
No.
That's all.
No, not at all. And if you think about it, I mean, Afghanistan was a viable country as long as we were there. South Vietnam, a viable country so long as we have a large troop presence. But you pull that out and it's no longer viable. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, General Jerry Martinez. I hope you will join us again sometime. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Glenn Flickinger, for being a great wingman here tonight. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We are going to continue it Monday night. I hope to see you then. Have a good weekend, everybody. Take care. Good night.
Well.